Well, hello everyone. Let's talk about chapter 6 this week. And this chapter deals with business level strategy in the industry environment. What we hope to discuss today, or at least learn from this chapter, deals with the type of strategies managers can develop to increase their profitability in fragmented industries, as well as discuss some special problems that may exist in the embryonic and growth industries and what type of strategies that a company could adopt to help them in those particular arenas. So also understands what are some of the competitive dynamics in a mature industry and what type of strategies that companies can be looking at in a declining industry and changing of their business model. So our textbook this week starts off with a very interesting opening case with reference to the newspaper industry and how that would be considered a declining industry. And it seems that that decline has dropped even further here in recent years. Basically due to the way we use technology today, which has really disrupted this industry. As content has moved to web-based, advertising had followed suit. We have instant access now to almost a paid for fee service or free content that's easily accessible anytime, anywhere, from any location. And as a result of that, the old traditional newspaper that we know is really become a thing of the past in a declining industry. Very interesting read indeed. So as we look at this particular chapter, it's going to be looking at different strategies that companies can pursue as they go about strengthening their competitive position in each of the different stages of the industry life cycle, and how some of those different stages can raise some interesting challenges for businesses. And the first one we'll talk about is going to be a fragmented industry over on page 180 in our textbook. And a fragmented industry is basically, it's an industry that's composed of a large number of small and medium-sized companies, such as the dry cleaning and restaurant industries. And it can be fragmented for several reasons. One of those could be the lack of scale economies, which means they just don't have that scale of economies to their cost advantage. And as a result of that, some industries may even be diseconomies of scales, where the customers prefer the unique type of food or style of popular restaurants, and that only offers a standardized offerings similar to some of our chain restaurants. Could be due to brand loyalty in the industry. It could be primarily local type strategy, and it may be difficult to build upon that brand through differentiation, as it usually is a brand loyalty, which if it's going to be local, be hard to differentiate that to a larger trend, especially if it's given a particular location or region. Again, the lack of scale economies of national brand loyalty implies there may be some low entry barriers, which is in this case where a steady stream of new entrants may keep the industry fragmented. Companies could also become specialized by customer group, customer need, or even a geographic region. And as a result of that, it kind of results in all kinds of specialized or custom-made products. Say, for instance, furniture, clothing, hats, boots, houses could fall in this category, as well as small service operations that cater to personal customer needs, such as dry cleaning services, landscaping services, as well as hair salons would be an example of a specialized service or service type of operations. And when we're looking at consolidating through value innovation, think about Staples. Staples started out as a grocery store business, then they opened up a big box store with a wide product selection, offering long operating hours and self-service business model. And this is an example where one started out and kind of fragmented over into other specific business models where The fragmented industries are wide open market spaces just waiting for a company like Staples to enter and to transform them into this pursuit of value innovation. And the value innovator defines a value different than some of the established companies. And they find a way to offer that value, that lower cost, through the creation of economies of scale, so to speak. There are two strategies that typically occurs when you're trying to replicate their offering, and one is chaining and the other one is franchising. Chaining involves opening additional locations that adhere basically to the very same formula and that company owns, and they can expand it through chaining if they can quickly build a national brand. And at the same time, they can rapidly open up new locations, and by knitting those locations together through good information systems, and this value innovator can start to realize many of the cost advantages that comes from a large size. When I think about chaining and value creation, where they're trying to rapidly open up new locations and knit all those locations together, I think of Walmart and their distribution network. Franchising, on the other hand, is a strategy very similar to chaining, except that the case of franchising, the founding company or the franchisor licenses the right to open and operate a new location to another enterprise, a franchisee, in return for a franchise fee. Obviously, there's some advantages to using a franchising strategy. One of those being that normally the franchisee puts up some or all of the capital to establish their operation. This certainly helps the finance the growth of this system and can result in a more rapid expansion. Second one would be that franchisee as owners of that particular operations, because they had to put up their own capital, typically gives them a very strong incentive to make sure that the operation is going to be successful and they run it hopefully efficiently and effectively to maintain their profit. And then number three, franchisees can have an incentive to improve their efficiency and the effectiveness of operations by developing new offerings and or processes. Part of that as well, if there's an advantage, obviously there's going to be a few disadvantages, a few drawbacks for franchising strategy. Number one, they may not be the same tight control that can be achieved through a chaining strategy. Number two, the franchising system, the franchisee captures some of the economic profit from a successful operation. And number three, as franchisees are small relative to the founding enterprise, they may have a higher cost of, they may be having to deal with a higher cost of capital, which raises system costs and has the potential to lower profitability. And given this, it really is going to depend on the managers evaluating which is going to be the best strategy given the circumstances that they find themselves in that particular enterprise. So let's go over to page 183, if you would. And as we think about another way of consolidating a franchise industry, or excuse me, a fragmented industry, certainly is to merge with or acquire their competitors, and combining them two together in a larger enterprise, they're able to realize the economies of scale and hopefully build a much quicker and more compelling national brand. So we're talking about a horizontal merger here. And some of the strategies associated with a industry from embryonic and growth industries on page 184. Let's talk about embryonic first. That particular industry is one that's beginning to develop, as we know, and a growth industry is one in which first-time demand is rapidly expanding as they're trying to get new customers to enter the market. And as a result of that, this type of industry poses some special challenges because new groups of customers with different kinds of needs start to enter the market. That company that's in that embryonic stage got to figure out how they're going to meet those competitive, or the competition, but equally important, the customer needs and wants and desires. And most embryonic industries emerge with some type of technological innovation that creates a new product opportunity. Customer demand for that is initially limited for a variety of reasons. In fact, 5 of those reasons were listed, with number 1 being the limited performance and poor quality of the first-time products that's being offered. Number 2, customer unfamiliarity with that new product and what that product can do for them. Number 3, poorly developed distribution channels to get the product to the customers. Number 4, a lack of complementary products that might increase the value of the product for the customers or add more value in the eyes of the customers that had the complementary products. And number 5, high production costs because of their small volumes of production if they enter into an embryonic type of or embryonic stage of the life cycle. Also, if that industry kind of moves away from that embryonic stage, that goes through a growth stage where they have opportunity to mass market, and that mass market is one in which a large number of customers enter the market, and it starts, as a result of that, it starts to emerge with 3 things that happens in that particular industry. Number 1 being online technological processes make that product easier to use, and it increases its value for the customer. Number 2, again, the complementary products are developed that is also increasing value to its customers, making more money for the company. And number 3, companies in this industry, they begin to find ways to reduce the cost of producing these new products so that they can lower their prices and stimulate higher demand with their customers. So and over on page 185, 186, we see figure 6.1, where it gives us an example of a market development in customer groups, and 6.2, the market share of different customer segments, which just gives you a benchmark of information to look at. And here is figure 6.1. And in this figure, it's really trying to get us to realize that different groups of customers have different needs when they enter into the market over time. Growth follows this S-type curve because the stage of the market development naturally moves from embryonic to mature, where customer demand first accelerates, then it kind of decelerates as the market starts to approach saturation point. And this is where most customers have already purchased the product for the first time, and the demand is increasing. New demand is increasing, is kind of limited to replacement demand. And as a result of that, this curve kind of gives us an indication of what market major implications to that market for company differentiation and cost and pricing decisions may become. Now let's talk about the following groups, and these are the groups that our textbooks talks about starting over on page excuse me, over on page 188. And these are the following groups of customers who may have different needs. One of those being innovators, or what is considered technological or gadget type folks who delight to be the first to purchase and experiment with a new product because it has some new technology. Then we have these called early adopters, where they understand technology may be important future applications and are willing to experiment with it to see if they can pioneer or how they can use that technology to leverage their competitive advantage. Then we have the early majority. which kind of is that leading wave or that mass market. And when they enter into that market, signifies the beginning of the growth stage. Customers are in the early majority. They're practical. They generally understand the value of new technology, and they weigh the benefits of adopting that new technology against their cost. And they will wait possibly to enter that market until they are fully confident that they will benefit. Then we have this, what is called the late majority, which is where customers who purchase a new technology or product only when they see it has great utility to them, and that particular technology is here to stay. And all this kind of lines itself back over to figure 6.1, by the way. Then we have the laggards, and this is the group of those customers, and they typically will enter late and be last. Typically conservative technology doesn't really, in their view, add a lot of value to them. And in fact, a lot of them will refuse to even adopt new products, even when the benefits are becoming obvious. And over in figure 6.2 again, on page 188, kind of gives you a percentage of the different market shares that goes along with figure 6.1. And here is 6.2 here when we think about those different customer segments. As we think about strategic implications over on page 188, how do we cross this, what is called this chasm? And we'll talk about that momentarily. Pioneering companies are often unable to create a business model that allows them to be successful over time, and they kind of remain as the market leaders because innovators and early adopters have very different customer needs from the early majority. Jeffrey Moore in his book argues that because of the differences in customer needs between these groups, that a business level strategy is required for companies to succeed in this emerging mass market. And those are quite different from those required to succeed in the embryonic markets. And in new strategies will often be required to strengthen a company's business model as that market develops over time. And they list 3 reasons in our textbook on page 188, with number 1 being innovators and early adopters are technologically sophisticated customers. They're willing to tolerate limitations of the product, but the early majority values the ease of use and reliability. Is it going to do what the product was designed to do? And is it very easy to use, or the minimal effort displayed by the customer to use that product? Number 2, innovators and early adopters can be reached through the specialized distribution channels, and the products are often sold by word of mouth. But the early majority uses mass marketing distribution channels and mass marketing advertising campaigns that should require or may require a different set of marketing sales strategies. And number 3, the last one, the innovators and early majority are few and they're not price sensitive, so companies serving them typically pursue a focus model. They produce a small quantity of product and they often price it high, and they're serving almost like a niche market, but they're trying to rapidly grow that niche to a mass market, large scale production, which may become critical if they want to ensure a high quality product that can be reliably produced at a low price point. The business models and strategies required to compete in an embryonic market populated by early adopters and innovators, as we already indicated, are very different from those that's required to compete in a high growth mass market. And as a result of that, moving from an embryonic market to a mass market is not easy, it's not very smooth, and it represents a competitive chasm. And you kind of see that over on page 189 in figure 6.3. And I think we have that slide where we'll see that. Maybe I don't have that slide in this particular chapter, but you can see it over on page 6.3, excuse me, page 189, 6.3, that competitive chasm. And in this particular one, it gives us the example of the smartphone business. But what are some of the implications to cross that chasm? Over on page 190, we see that the first factor associated with that, the first factor that accelerates customer demand in the new products is a new product's relative advantage, and the degree to which that new product can be perceived to better satisfy the customer needs. The second factor is an importance of more complexity. Let me back up just for a second. I got ahead of myself. So the strategic implications for crossing the chasm for any innovator and early adopters in the early majority we see here. Which you already talked about, the technological sophistication, how can we reach those specialized distribution channels, and they usually will produce a small quantity at a higher price for innovator and early adopters. And the early majority look at the value, their perceived value of its use and reliability. Distribution and advertising campaigns are going to be different. And again, restating large scale mass production to produce a product at a low price. Now, let me catch up. Okay, here, the strategic implications of differences in the market growth rates on page 190. Now I've caught back up. Sorry about that. So managers must understand that a final important issue in the embryonic and growth industries, that different markets develop at different rates. And as a result of that, there's a number of factors that helps explain the variation in the market growth rates for different products, thus the speed with which a particular market develops. The first factor, found over on page 190 and 191, deals with that acceleration of customer demand is a new product's relative advantage. And this is the degree to which a new product is perceived to be better at satisfying the customer needs than the product that it's superseding. Factor number 2 deals with complexity, and that is where products are viewed by customers as being complex and difficult to master, which will diffuse more slowly than products that are easy to master. All about ease of use. Number 3 is the compatibility, which refers to the degree to which a new product is perceived as being consistent with current needs of existing values of potential customers. Then we talk about this thing of complexity, and the complexity is the degree to which a new product is perceived as difficult to understand, and its ability to be used is not as easy as we would hope. Then we go into another factor called trialability, which is the degree to which potential customers can experiment with the new product during hands-on trials. Then we have this thing called observability, which refers to the degree to which the results of using and enjoying that new product can be clearly seen and appreciated by other people. And when we're in a market that's rapidly growing and the popularity of a new product increases or spreads in a way, then we get to this term called viral model of inflection as a issue that managers has got to be concerned with, because lead adopters, the first customers who typically buy a product in a market, can become infected or enthused with the product. An example that was used is the new iPhone that constantly comes out by Apple. Also, leader lead adopters, infect other people by telling others about the advantages of that product. Again, word of mouth advertising. As we go into a new strategy of mature industry over on page 191, 192, we think about an industry which is commonly dominated by a small number of large companies. And they can also, in a mature industry, contain medium-sized companies as well as a host of small companies, specialized companies. And the large company that's already in that market would often determine the nature of the nature of the competition in that industry, because they have the opportunity to influence Porter's forces. So when we think about strategies to defer entry into this particular market, there may be cases in which scale and brand may not be sufficient to deter entry. And there have got to be other strategies that's got to be looked at as well. And those strategies are going to include these three: product proliferation, limit pricing, and strategic commitment. So let's look at one a little bit closer, each one a little bit closer. Let's think about product proliferation. And this is where companies try to enter mature industry by looking for market segments or niches that are poorly served by the incumbent or the already in that particular industry companies. And this looks at trying to gain new segments, gaining experience, gaining scale and brand in that segment, then progressively moving up in the market. A product proliferation strategy involves incumbent companies attempting to forestall entry by new entrants by making sure that every niche or segment in that marketplace is being well served. So instead of them becoming new substitutes taking over their markets, these companies are becoming that substitute. Now this product proliferation strategy, because it gives new entrants very little opportunity to find an unoccupied niche in the industry, can effectively deter entry. Excuse me. Excuse me. Then the second one is called limit price strategy over on page 193. And in this limit price strategy, what we're seeing is that may deter entry when the incumbent companies in the industry enjoy economies of scale. But sometimes the resulting cost advantages are not enough to keep potential rivalries out of that industry. So they implement a limit price strategy, which involves charging a price that is lower than that required to maximize profits in the short run, but is above the cost structure of the potential industries. And if incumbents charge that price, what the market will bear, then this will be above the unit cost structure of new entrants, allowing them to enter and still make a profit under the pricing umbrella set by the incumbents. However, the best options for incumbents might be to charge a price that is still above their own cost structure, but just below the cost structure of any potential new entrants, as this too will help deter entry as well. And that limiting pricing strategy may be thought of as a long-term profit maximizing price. So they're giving up the short term to gain the long term. Strategic commitments is that final one, is where investments that signal an incumbent's long-term commitment to a market or segment of that market. And what that involves is raising the perceived cost of entering a market, thereby reducing the likelihood of a new entrant. Some of these strategic commitments, they may act as an entry deterrent, may include making significant investments in basic research, product development, or advertising above those necessary to maintain that company's competitive advantage over its rivals. Or another way to look at that would be that the incumbents have a very aggressive strategy and history of responding to new entries through price cutting, accelerating product development, increase their advertising expenditures, and they're really looking at this to tell those other companies, hey, we are here to stay. Whatever you do, we're going to do it one step bigger and better. Now, when a company does that, they have to be very careful that they don't run afoul of antitrust laws when they're doing this particular type of strategy. This figure is over on page 193, which kind of helps give you a graphical representation of that discussion that we just had. So as we move on to strategies to manage rivalry over on page 194, and as we think about this, this is really where there are several strategies that could be available to companies to help manage their industry rivalry, which includes price signaling, price leadership, and non-price competition, and capacity control. So let's look at each one of those quickly. Over on page 194, we talk about price signaling. Price signaling is that process by which companies increase or decrease their product prices to convey their intentions to the other companies and influence the way other companies price their products. A company uses price signaling to improve industry profitability, and this strategy is just this for that. It's a well-known price signaling maneuver that a company does exactly what its rival does. If the rivals cut prices, they will cut prices. If the rivals increase prices, they will rise. They will increase prices as well. This for that, or that type of strategy signals that that company, hey, we're in this for the long haul as well. Price leadership over on page 195 talks about when one company takes the responsibility of setting prices that maximizes the industry's profitability, that company assumes the position of the price leader. And that formal price leadership, which companies jointly set prices, is illegal under antitrust laws, which we discussed a few moments ago with reference to strategic commitments that they don't run afoul of antitrust laws. And as a result of that, the process of price leadership is often very subtle. I mean, it's not very blatant, but very subtle. And the price set by the weakest company is the one that with the highest cost structure is often used as the basis for competitive pricing. Or in other words, it's the way that they use to help those other companies drive them out of business. Then let's talk about non-price competition. This is a way to manage rivalry within an industry. And the use of this strategy is try to prevent costly price cutting and price wars that does not preclude competition by product differentiation. And in many industries, this product differentiation strategies or principal tools companies use to deter potential entrants and manage their rivalry within that industry. Product and market segment dimensions are typically used to identify 4 non-price competitive strategies based on product differentiation, market penetration, product development, market development, and product proliferation. And there's these 4 models here. And I think over on page 196, we see figure 6.5 is what gives us this non-pricing strategy. So let's talk about those quickly as well. Page 197, market penetration. And when a company concentrates on expanding market share in its existing product markets, it's engaging in a strategy of market penetration. And this is where a strategy uses heavy advertising to promote and build product differentiation. Because brand name products are often command because brand name products often command premium prices. Building market share in this situation has the potential to become very profitable. And in some mature industries, for example, like soap and detergent, disposable diapers, and brewing, a market penetration strategy becomes a long-term strategy. Now let's look at product development. Product development involves consistently creating new or improved products to replace those that are existing. This product development is crucial for maintaining product differentiation and hopefully building market share. Redefining and improving products, especially when technology is changing, is a crucial strategy companies should use to fine-tune and improve their business models in a mature industry. But this type of competition can be very vicious as a price war because it can be very expensive and can dramatically increase a company's cost structure when they're trying to improve based on chasing technology, as an example. Let's talk about market penetration. This is where finding the new market segments for a company's products. And a company who's pursuing this strategy wants to capitalize on the brand name it has developed in one of its market segments by locating that new market segments in which it competes, building upon its brand name and customer loyalty. The final one deals with product proliferation, and this generally means that large companies in the industry all have a product in each market segment or niche, and as a result of that, product proliferation allows the development of a stable industry competition based on product differentiation, not price. That is, it becomes a non-price competition based on the development of new products. Let's talk about capacity control over on page 199. And in this, capacity control is where excess capacity arises when companies collectively produce too much output or too much product. And one way to dispose of it is to cut prices. And when one company cut prices, other companies quickly do the same because they fear that a price cutter will be able to sell its entire inventory, and they'll be left holding their unwanted goods. Therefore, this typically will result in a price war. One way to prevent this accumulation of costly excess capacities is where the companies must devise strategies that let them control or at least benefit from capacity expansion programs as they keep up with their competitions. What are some of the factors causing this excess capacity over on page 200? It often derives from technological developments. Excess capacity occurs when new technology can produce more than the old, and this new technology often is introduced in large increments, which has the potential to generate overcapacity, which overcapacity may also be caused by competitive factors within an industry, and entry into such an industry is one such factor. The recent economic recession that we just came out of called the global overcapacity, and as a result of that, the price of steel plunged when the global recovery as the global recovery continues, the price is beginning to increase. And because of this, the age of a company's physical assets could also be a source of the problem if those companies did not improve their technological manufacturing process. I think one of the classic examples in a company that you may consider in your next course is Nucor Steel, and they were really the creators or the innovators are the ones who really jumped on this mini mill concept and using electric arc furnace. So it's a very interesting concept where they use scrap instead of raw iron and ore. They use scrap metal, which is certainly environmentally friendly, but they use this electric arc furnaces as well. But that's just a company who was able to survive in this global economic recession because of the technological advantages that they did to their manufacturing process. So Nucor Steel is an interesting company to study as well. Capacity control strategy, how do you go about choosing that? How do we go about doing this to preempt rivals? One way is the company must forecast a large increase in the demand in their product market. Then they have to move rapidly to reestablish their large-scale operations that will enable them to satisfy the predicted customer demand. As you can imagine, this is a very risky strategy because it involves investing resources to the extent before we fully understand what that market is going to become. And as a result of that, it's almost like looking into a crystal ball. So your strategic analysis, your market analysis has got to be very robust when you do this type of strategy. And another way is companies must collectively find indirect means of coordinating with each other so that they can all be aware of the mutual benefits of their actions. One way of doing that is through benchmarking, if the benchmarking would be allowed in that particular industry. But you have to also be very leery of conclusion, and you got to look out for the antitrust laws as well. Here is a figure 6.6, which kind of talks about the different intensity of competitions in a declining industry. And in this, let's talk about the severity of a decline on page 202. This is where this figure's at. This is figure 6.7, also on page 203. And when the size of a total market is shrinking, competition tends to intensify in a declining industry and profit rates tend to fall. 4 critical factors that are typically that we see when as a result of this and this intensity of the competition in a declining industry is the intensity of competition is greater in industries in which the decline is rapid. So if we have the speed of the decline, as opposed to industries with the decline is slow and gradual. And I think if you think of an industry that's slow and gradual, I think our textbook uses the tobacco industry, or at least is not as robust as it used to be back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s here in this country. And you think about number 2, the entry or exit, the exit barriers. The intensity of competition is greater in declining industries in which exit barriers are high, meaning that it could potentially cost that company more to get out of than to stay in that declining market, which we talked about in our previous chapter. Number 3, related to fixed costs, the industry of competition is greater in a declining industry, which fixed costs are high, which is also a deterrent of a height of an exit barrier. And number 4, when the competition is greater in declining industries in which the product is perceived as a commodity, in contrast to industries in which differentiation gives rise to significant brand loyalty. So we kind of see that in that figure, and we kind of see a strategy of what a company is going to do over on page 202, where they could be a leadership strategy, which they become that dominant player in that declining industry. They could do a niche strategy, which focuses on pockets of demand, which are declining more slowly in the industry. They can do a harvest strategy, which optimizes their cash flow. And they can do a divestment strategy where a company sells its business off to others. And that's figure 6.7. So almost done here. So when we think about leadership strategy on page 202, 203, define those a little bit more. The leadership, niche, and harvest and divestment strategy. Let's talk about leadership strategy. And it really looks at aiming at growing in a declining industry by picking up market share that companies that are leaving the industry. And when a company does this, they have distinctive strengths that allow them to capture market share in such a declining industry when speed and intensity of competition in the declining industry are somewhat moderate. Some of the tactical steps companies may use in order to position themselves could be through aggressive pricing and marketing to build market share, could be acquiring established competitors, consolidate the industry, thereby raising the stakes for their competitors. Also, it could be that this leadership strategy signals to their competitors that a firm is willing to stay and compete and may exit out competitors or those who are weaker. This is where the strongest of the strongest of the fittest will survive. Let's talk about our next strategy on page 203 is where it's looking at pockets of the demand where the demand is stable or declining less slowly from the industry as a whole. And this strategy kind of makes sense when a company has some strengths relative to those niches in which demand remains relatively strong. Then over on page 204, we talk about a harvest strategy. And in some cases, it may be the best choice when a company wishes to exit a declining industry and optimize cash flow in the process. This strategy makes the most sense when the firm anticipates a steep decline and intense future competition, or where it may lack strength relative to remaining pockets of demand in that industry. And a harvest strategy typically requires the company to halt all new investments in capital equipment, also advertising, research and development, and so forth. And in this practice, this strategy may be difficult to implement because employee morale may suffer, and if customers realize that a company is using a harvest strategy, they may choose to go buy substitutes. Then the last one we talk about is on page 204 is a divestment strategy. And this strategy rests on that idea that a company can recover most of its investment by selling off the company's assets and trying to look in their crystal ball and determine when's going to be the best time to do that before that industry goes into a very steep decline. And this may be a good strategy when a company has few strengths relative to whatever product, This strategy may be appropriate when the company has few strengths relative to the pockets of demand that may likely remain in a declining industry. One of the major drawbacks of this divestment strategy is that, again, its success depends on the company to be able to spot that decline before it actually declined, before the value of those assets become basically no longer valuable. So it's a way in which they could recoup some or all of their investments. But this is where strategy, market analysis will become paramount. So this ends chapter 6 review, and thank you for looking.